present to you Sister Anita Baird. Some of you may have even checked her out on the internet before today, but let me tell you a little bit about her. What I know is that she is full of life and fun and goodness and wisdom. That's the most important thing, most likely. But let me tell you about some of the things that are remarkable about this woman. Uh, she resides in Oak Park, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago. And in her congregation, the Daughters of the Heart of Mary, she served as regional superior, provincial counselor, and the provincial in the United States. She was the first African American to serve as chief of staff to the Archbishop of Chicago. That was back in 1997. And she was the founding director of the Archdiocese of Chicago's Office for Racial Justice in 2000. She directed the Archdiocese's initiatives to eradicate racism in its structures and institutions. And she served as Cardinal George's liaison for race relationship in the city of Chicago. She's been recognized for religious and community activism around the nation. She gave the opening keynote at the 9th National Black Catholic Congress in Chicago in 2002. And she was the past president, we're not surprised, of the National Black Sisters Conference and the recipient of that organization's Harriet Tubman Moses of Her People Award. And she presently serves on that board's board of directors. She was awarded an honorary Doctor of Ministry degree from Catholic Theological Union in 2013 in recognition for her outstanding contributions in the work for racial justice in the church and in the city of Chicago. And she was awarded the Outstanding Leadership Award by the Leadership Conference of Women Religious in 2018. We are really, really honored and privileged and delighted to welcome you, Anita, to our Sisters Day.
Oh, thank you, Sister Kathy. Thank you so much for the invitation. I just wish I could have flown out to San Diego and enjoyed some of that wonderful weather that you're blessed to have. But it is a joy to be with you today. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna try to condense things, but let me set the stage by saying that I will be speaking primarily from the perspective of being an African-American woman who is Catholic in the church. And each one of us has our stories as people of color, the struggles that we've gone through, the prejudice that we continue to be faced with. We've seen so much in just the first 2 weeks of this new year. We're seeing America, as Dr. King said, the house is on fire. And part of that is the struggle that we continue to have to accept all of our people and to be one America. And so that is facing us in a way as we look back from the summer and the riots, from the continuing killing of unarmed men and women of color, and what we saw just last week that really shook the core of our nation. So in doing that, I want to talk a little bit about being Black and Catholic in America. And I'm doing this for two reasons. One, most people think that Blacks are new to the Catholic Church. And even today, I find people say, oh, you're Catholic? Yes, I am Catholic. You know, it's just assumed that we're Baptist or some Protestant denomination. So that's one part of it. I want to also talk about the historical implications and the role that the Catholic Church has played in the enslavement of people of color and in the taking of lands from the indigenous people. I think it's very important for us to understand that slavery in this country did not begin in 1619. So I'm just going to give some historical points, and then I'm going to talk more directly to who I believe we are called to be as women religious and the role we can play at the forefront of this time in our history. We're called in our communities to read the signs of the times. So the question I would ask today is, what are the signs of the times saying to us about race relations and the future of our country? So let me begin. We're gonna, I think most of you have seen the movie Back to the Future. So we're gonna do a time capsule trip real quick. We're gonna begin in 1452. Now, why is 1452 important? Well, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversas, in English, while different. And in that papal bull, he authorized King Alphonsus V of Portugal to reduce any Saracens or Muslims and pagans and any other non-believers to perpetual slavery, facilitating the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa. This was in 1452. That same pope in 1455 issued a second bull, Romanus Pontifex, Roman Pontiff. And it was a follow-up sanctioning the Catholic nations of Europe's dominion over discovered lands, over newly discovered lands, and sanctifying the seizure of non-Christian lands. These papal bulls gave Christian explorers the right to claim lands that they discovered and lay claim to those lands for their Christian monarchs, sanctifying the enslavement of native non-Christian peoples in Africa and throughout the New World. And these papal bulls paved the way for what became known as the global slave trade of the 15th and 16th centuries. The history of Black Catholics in the Americas dates back over 500 years to 1494, when the first free Africans arrived in what was known as Hispaniola with Christopher Columbus. In 1501, the Spanish king sanctioned the enslavement of Africans into Spain's American colonies, beginning the 400 plus years of the enslavement of Africans in the Americas, sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Church. The reason I think that's important, most of us think of slavery beginning in 1619 with England. And really, slavery began under the blessing of our own church. Since 1526, when Spanish colonists brought the first enslaved Africans who were Spanish speaking and Roman Catholics to what is today the United States, we have been active in the church, in the country, in shaping its life and its future. And during the same time, spanning really from 1565 to 1863, when slavery ended, it was viewed as exclusively a legal and political issue. So it was common for Catholic laity and bishops and priests, religious orders, to own slaves. The Maryland and DC Jesuits, the Sulpicians, they all owned slaves. Vincentians, Capuchins, Carmelites, Kentucky Dominicans, the Sisters of Loretto, the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, the Visitation Sisters in Washington, DC, all owned slaves to work their lands. And Bishop John Carroll, first bishop here in this country, had two Black servants. One was enslaved and one was free, as did many of the bishops of the southern cities such as New Orleans and Mobile. So we see that the church profited, benefited from, and supported slavery. In the early 1700s, however, Spain offered freedom to slaves in Florida, and those who could escape to Florida if they converted to Catholicism. And records show that slaves from as far away as Maryland risked their lives to reach freedom in Florida. But they had to convert. When I read that, I thought about my own experience. When I was born, my family was Lutheran. And when I was 5, my mother wanted to put me into a Lutheran school. And our pastor went all over the city of Chicago. This was in early 50s. And he could not find a Lutheran school in our vicinity that would take me. He found one, and it would require a 1.5-hour trip each way to get there and back. And our pastor was a good man, Pastor Schultze, and I remember him coming to our house, and he shared this information with my mother. And my mother said, well, how do you expect me to get on a bus, 2 trains to take my child? I have to wait there all day and then bring her back home. And you're telling me she would be the only Black child in the school? And he said, yes. So my mother said, well, Pastor Schultze, with all due respect, if my child isn't good enough for your school, your church isn't good enough for me. So we stopped being Lutheran that day. And 1 block away was, on one corner was the Catholic school, St. Anselm's. On the other corner was an Episcopalian school. So years later, I remember asking my mother, I said, we were Protestant. Why didn't you put me into the Episcopalian school? Why did you put me in the Catholic school? And I was waiting on this profound answer. And my mother simply said, the tuition was cheaper at the Catholic school. So she made her decision, not based on faith, but based on what it would cost for me to go to school. So she marched me up the street. I was put into the Catholic school. And in those days, you had to convert and become Catholic. So when I was 7, I became Catholic, and my mother did. And eventually, my father did as well. But it was one of the best decisions that my mother made. And I'm truly grateful for that. But let's go a little further. And I think it's important for us to look at the progression as we continue to go further. And that is, I just want to talk a little bit about the church continued, I think, not to be concerned about the newly freed slaves after the Civil War. They were very outspoken on behalf of immigrant Catholics, but not upon those that were newly freed. And the decision was made at the Baltimore Council in 1866, when this came to the floor. What was the church's responsibility and role in evangelizing and ministering to the newly freed Africans? And it was decided that the primary responsibility of the church was to the growing immigrant communities that were coming over here. And they made a decision in many ways to abandon converting and ministering to African Americans. They did invite orders to come over from Europe if they were willing to do that. And so one was the Mill Hill Fathers, who came over from England, and they eventually became known as the Josephites. And they dedicated their entire life to serving within the African American community and advocating on our behalf. But for the most part, from after the end of the Civil War until the early 50s, really, the church took very little interest in the lives of Black people. In the course of this, in 1886, Father Augustus Toten, who is now the Venerable Father Augustus Toten, on the track to be hopefully canonized one day, became the first recognized priest of African descent, but had to go to Rome for his education. There was not a seminary here that would take him or allow him to be ordained. And when he first came back, his story is very interesting. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you. He was born into slavery in Missouri, and after his father died fighting in the Civil War, his mother escaped with her 3 children, baby on her hip, crossed the Mississippi River into Illinois. And the German priest and sisters, who were the school sisters of Notre Dame, were very good to the family, and they saw in him a very bright young person. And it was the pastor that really fought hard to find a place where he could go to seminary, and ended up going to Rome. So later he came back here, and he was so popular as a preacher that the church was filled both with whites and blacks. And this was in Southern Illinois, and the bishop and many of the pastors were very upset. And so they asked the archbishop here in Chicago if they could transfer him here. They didn't want him in Quincy any longer. And so he came to Chicago, and he started St. Monica's, which was the first Black Catholic parish in here in Chicago. During this same time, a man by the name of Daniel Rudd started a Black Catholic newspaper, and he believed that the church was the best hope for Black people. And he calls for the first Black Catholic Congress. And that was to espouse for schools for children, to appeal to the labor unions, which were run by Catholics, to admit Blacks, to advocate for better housing, and so forth. And out of that came the Black Catholic Congresses in the late 1800s, and there were 5 held. The last one in 1894, and the reason there were no more is that as they met at each Congress, they became more vocal and demanded more rights and for the church to be accountable. And the priests who were like their spiritual directors took offense. And so they shut down the Congresses. And there was not another one until 1987 in Washington, D.C., which was the 6th. And at that, our own Sister Thea Bowman was one of the keynote speakers. But again, it was about power and who would control. During this same time, you also had the establishment of 3 Black religious congregations of women, because there were not congregations that would take Black women. So you have the Oblate Sisters of Providence in Baltimore that were founded in 1829 by Mother Elizabeth Lange, and she is also on the road to canonization. And in 1842, the Sisters of the Holy Family in New Orleans, founded by Henriette Delille, who is also up for canonization. And the last community was founded in 1918, and that was the Franciscan Handmaids of Mary. They were founded in Savannah, Georgia, but because of the racism that they had to endure, they accepted an invitation from the Cardinal of New York to move the congregation there. And so that's where they are located. So in spite of all that the church was doing in terms of not really accepting Blacks, not wanting us to wear religious habits, the Bishop of Baltimore tried several times to disband the Oblate Sisters of Providence. Those communities still stand by the grace of God. And when we look at the faithfulness and what little they had to endure, they continued to love the church and to serve the church. And then from the 1920s through the 50s, and primarily through the work of people like the Josephites, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, and the Black religious communities, and many diocesan priests, the population of Black Catholics grew in this country and increased over 200%, particularly as Blacks left the South and moved north. So places like New York and Chicago and Detroit had very strong, vibrant Black Catholic communities. I know that in terms of the schools, integration did not begin to happen until 1947. And one of my heroes is Cardinal Ritter of St. Louis. And he was the first to integrate Catholic schools. And that was 7 years before Brown v. Board, which desegregated public schools in this nation. I lived in St. Louis for 2 years when I was 8 and 9. and went to school there. It was my first time going to an integrated school. And that's what my mother wanted. She wanted me to be exposed to other people. And in Chicago, the schools were not integrated yet. So Cardinal Ritter is truly one of my heroes, and I thank the world of him for the work that he did. So when we, continue on to the present day, after the civil rights marches, late 50s, early 60s, with the death of Dr. King and the burning of the cities, Black Catholic clergy and sisters came together. And so they formed the Clergy Caucus and the Sisters Conference in 1968. And so we're celebrating our 51st anniversary. And we continue to speak out and to stand for justice for our people, to be a voice for the voiceless. And that's what we have been called to do. And we try to remain faithful to that. In 1965, when Dr. King was marching in Selma with John Lewis, he called for clergy to come. And at that time, Catholic clergy responded in a way they had never responded around the issues of race before. So you had priests and religious sisters that came from all over the country to stand and march with Dr. King in Selma. And two of them, if you saw the film Selma, Sister Antona Ebo and Sister Barbara Moore, who were founding members of the Sisters Conference. And Barbara Moore is still with us. Sister Antona has gone home to God. But they went to Selma and bore witness to what was going on there. And at that same time in 1965, Bishop Harold Perry became the first African American to be ordained as a bishop here in the country. And we say African American known because the Healy brothers, one was a bishop and one was the founder of Georgetown University. Their father was Irish, their mother was enslaved, and but they ended up married. He married her, he freed her, married her, and they had 7 or 8 children. About half of them became religious, but they did not acknowledge publicly their African heritage. So really Bishop Perry holds that for us. And so it brings us to the present day, and the struggle continues. And I just wanted to give you a sense briefly of the struggle, the faithfulness, and the contribution that Blacks have made to this church. So that we're not newcomers. We were here long before any other group that came to this land that were Catholic. And yet we continue to struggle to have a place at the table. Many pastoral letters have been written, but they go on the shelf and they collect dust, and it doesn't really change anything. The last one was 2018. And in that one, the bishops tried to speak to every group of color that is struggling in this nation, but the language is weak. They don't talk about white supremacy. They don't talk about the role of the Catholic Church in continuing to not be inclusive of everyone in terms of the issues of justice, and the bishop speaking out clearly. So it's important for us to remember that it's an ongoing struggle. And the last thing I just want to say is that to ask for you, if you would pray with us, that Henriette DeLille, Elizabeth Lange, Augustus Tolton, Pierre Toussaint, Julia Greeley, and Thea Bowman will one day be raised to the altar of sainthood, if it be God's will. So with that, let me move on to what I just want to spend a little time talking about us and talking to us as women religious. It was mentioned that in 2018, I became the first African-American woman to be honored by the Leadership Conference of Women Religious. And in accepting that honor, I said the following: as the first African-American to receive this leadership award, you honor not only me, but every African-American woman religious, as you bear witness to the fact that Black life matters. Black religious life matters. And that these valiant and humble Black women trusted in the Lord, putting their hands to the plow and never looking back. I was aware that I was standing on their shoulders. Because until the 1940s, Black women who desired to enter all white communities were denied acceptance simply because of the color of their skin. And when they were accepted in the late 40s, the community that Sister Antona belonged to, they had to do a separate novitiate. They were not allowed to set foot on the mother house grounds until they were professed. So they did a segregated novitiate and were never part of the group that they were being professed with. And then, that continued for a long time. Some were even asked to deny their Blackness and to pass for white if they were to be accepted. So the history of Black Catholic religions has been all but been erased, often unrecognized and seldom celebrated. And that's what racism does. It invalidates the worth of people of color, and it questions whether or not our lives matter. It is what allows someone who is sworn to serve and protect to kneel on the neck of a fellow human being for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and not blinking an eye until life itself seeps away. So in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, Pope Francis stated emphatically that we cannot close our eyes to any form of racism or exclusion while pretending to defend the sacredness of every human life. And because racism is such an endemic and pervasive force, we're ensnared and entangled and enmeshed in a web of racial subordination and dominance that is largely invisible and outside of our awareness for the most part, except for those who suffer the indignities every single day of their lives. I don't know how many of you have heard of Father Brian Massigan. He's an African American priest, professor of theology at Fordham University in New York. And he suggests that certain shifts need to occur in the dominant approach present in US Catholicism in order to achieve a more adequate ethic of racial justice. A shift from a stress on racism to white privilege, from passivity to personal responsibility. So he's saying we've got to focus on white privilege and what that means for people of color. And he says if dark or Black skin color means rejection and humiliation, then it follows that racism also connotes a social context in which white skin color means advantage and privilege, a sense of comfort and belonging that whites everywhere unconsciously or consciously assume. We only have to look at what happened last week. For years, since I've been doing this work from 2000, one of the stumbling blocks was to try to get people to understand what white privilege was. And the response always was, well, I'm not rich. I have to go to work. I struggle. My family came over here from Ireland and the sign said, no Irish need apply. There was always an excuse to say white privilege only is afforded to the wealthy, when in fact, white privilege is simply about one's skin color. We have only to look at last summer when the president had no problem bringing out the National Guard and tear gassing peaceful marchers in the street. You compare that to what happened last week. We were not only caught off guard, but we also saw some police welcoming those who were coming, opening the doors for them, taking pictures with them, and not hesitating to draw their guns. Now, yes, 2 people were killed, but I would just ask you, what would the response have been if that mob had been Black or brown? Blood would have flowed in the streets of Washington, D.C. So if you don't understand white privilege, that's the stark contrast. What was done this summer to people of color and those whites who stood with people of color, and what happened last week in our capital. So we need to look at structural and systemic approaches to racism and the view to understand the phenomenon of this and what it is doing to us. And although as religious, most of us believe that we're living relatively faultless lives, all of us are entangled in a form of evil that is every bit as pernicious as the blatant race crimes of long ago. In fact, it may be even more so because years ago it was just so very clear. Signs said, colored water fountain, white water fountain. You sat in the back of the bus. In the theaters, you went upstairs. It was very clear. It was the demarcation. But today it is not. And so it has a way of just getting under our skin and continuing to grow. And we can't see it. It is invisible in many ways as COVID-19. So as some religious congregations struggle to come to terms with their shameful history today, many congregations are going back and looking in their archives and wanting to see, did we have women of color that came? Why did they leave? What was our response? How did we accept them? So they're doing that hard work. They're looking at their history. Did they own or sell human beings? And while most religious congregations did not own slaves, they did practice racism and segregation in their acceptance policies and the way they operated their sponsored institutions. And so now our congregations must own these truths, repent, and be reconciled through their words and actions. Because I believe, sisters, if we who claim to be bowed to the Lord cannot overcome the sin of racism through grace, then there is little hope that the larger church will ever be able to be healed of the sin of racism. Since the early beginnings of the church, we've struggled to be one in Christ, a community of believers where all are welcome and valued, and where diversity is embraced, where the community of believers is of one heart and one mind, regardless of racial, ethnic, or cultural differences. And we can only authentically claim to be Catholic or universal when we begin to reflect this diversity in our lived experience. Religious communities must always honor and celebrate the unique charisms, histories, stories of faith, but we cannot become complacent, wedded to the past, and unwilling to create a new model of community where we reach out, we invite, we welcome women and men of color, not only to enter our congregations, but to transform them and recreate them while remaining faithful to the living charism. Too often we talk the talk, but we fail to walk the walk in our communities. We give lip service to diversity, but we do little to make it a reality. We must always ask the hard but necessary questions. Are we intentional and deliberate in our vocational mission to invite young people of different cultures to journey with us? Are we willing to receive people of color with authentic, genuine hospitality? Are we, or should I say, our mother houses, are they bathed in whiteness, in art and music and food and literature, and the list goes on and on? Do we find it uncomfortable to accept cultural differences in the way others pray and celebrate life and eat and recreate? Do we bathe ourselves in green on the feast of St. Patrick, but express discomfort when our Black sisters or sisters of color dress in their native dress for us as Black people with Afrocentric garb during Black History Month, or our Latino members desire to speak and pray in their native language? Are we open to praying in different ways, and not just on the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe or Dr. King's holiday? Are we willing to become more flexible in our community living? Or do our members of color often find themselves isolated and alone after professing vows? The reason I say that, we're finding that many of our younger sisters in the Black Sisters Conference, once they make their vows, they're almost forced to live alone. No one wants to live with them. And that's becoming a real struggle for those younger, or I should say newer members. They're not young, but they're newer. And so what does that mean, that they cannot live in community with their own sisters? Are we willing to listen to the pain of others, to hear their story and understand that that story may not be our experience, but it's real, and we need to hear it and understand it and be able to work through it? You know, are we willing to admit to our stereotypes, our biases, our prejudgments of those that we consider to be different? Are we willing to learn from our members of color who have so much to offer and enrich our communities? In the words of Sister Thea Bowman, when she spoke at the Bishops' Conference, she said, "What does it mean to be Black and Catholic? It means that I come to my church fully functioning. I bring myself, my Black self, all that I am and all that I have, all that I hope to become. I bring my whole history, my traditions, my experience, my culture, my African-American song and dance and gesture and movement and teaching and preaching and healing and responsibility. I bring it as gift to the church." Our members of color come with gifts that can enrich and strengthen our communities if we are only open to receiving them. Our prayer life will be deepened, the way we worship will be enriched, our community celebrations will be enriched. The question is, are we willing to start having these difficult conversations about our biases and fears and our apprehensions, to be vulnerable enough to open and make room at the table for everyone who wants to journey with us? In our predominantly Eurocentric congregations, what are we willing to do, both individually and corporately, to move beyond our limitations and our fears as women religious? We must become open and honest and accountable to all the members of our communities, but particularly the women of color that come to journey with us, that are called by our charism. So we need to be honest, we need to challenge ourselves and one another, and we need to be risk takers. I will close with a story. Here, there's a mural at my church of St. Sabina on the south side of the city, and the title of the mural is "The Last Supper to Be." And it's huge, it takes up the whole wall in the chapel. And when it was being painted, I remembered that I asked my pastor, as I looked at it, there were people from every tribe and nation around the table. There were children, there were men, there were women, there were Native people, there were Asian people, there were Latino people, there were every group was represented at that table. But in the center, the image of Jesus was very faint. You can hardly make it out. And I said to him, "Why is the image of Jesus so faint?" And the response that I got from my pastor really kind of was the catalyst for me doing the work that I do and I continue to do. And he said simply this: "Until everyone has a place at this table, Jesus cannot come into the fullness of his glory." Until everyone has a place at the table, Jesus cannot come into the fullness of his glory. That is our work, sisters. That is our invitation. That is our challenge, is to make sure there is a place for everyone at the table of the Lord. That is Eucharist. That's the heart of Eucharist. That's what brings us day after day to the table, and we receive and we say that we are what? That we are creating this table where everyone will have a place. Then we can truly say that we are Catholic and that we are universal. But more importantly, we can say that we are followers of Jesus. And we will begin to create that new Jerusalem right here, right now. in this country. Thank you. What I want to do now, if you would put up the microaggression, I would appreciate that. And the reason I'm giving you this, a lot, like I said, we only have a little time today, but a lot of this you'll be able to hopefully use, learn more, do more research on your own, if you're really committed to working to become anti-racist, to stand on the right side of justice. So this has become kind of a term that's coming to being within the last few years. And but I think it resonates with all of us because I think every one of us has been guilty of this at some point. And so as we look at the definition of microaggressions, microaggressions are brief and commonplace verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities. And this is the definition that Beverly Daniel Tatum came up with, and she's the president of Spelman College in Atlanta. Goes on to say microaggressions can be intentional or unintentional, and sometimes even well-meaning, but they communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial messages or assumptions to the receiver, primarily to the person of color on the receiving end. So the ability to even notice these instances requires us to educate ourselves about the experiences of people of color in this country and the significance behind such remarks. And I listed for you some common microaggressions. The list could go on, but I think we can all resonate with some of these. The message that they send and what to say when you hear friends, family, colleagues, your sisters, or perhaps yourself saying them. And so, for instance, you're so articulate, you don't sound Black. I can't tell you how many times I've had people to say that to me. Don't blame me, I never owned slaves. So why are we even wasting our time talking about racism? My family, struggled when they came here. It wasn't easy for them. We had our own issues. White privilege doesn't exist. I talked about that a little earlier. That's one of the first things, defense that people say. I don't have white privilege. Yes, you do. You woke up with white skin and you didn't have to think if you go outside your door, somebody's going to kill you today simply because of the color of your skin. All lives matter. And I have to say that religious are guilty of this. And yes, we know that all life matters, but I would simply say to you, until Black life matters equally, until any person of color's life matters the same as a white person's life, we have to keep saying this, that Black life matters, brown life matters, yellow life matters, red life matters, because of the way that people of color are continuing to be treated in this country. So we have to stop saying all lives. We know that. But we also know those lives that do not matter equally in our country. And then I'm not racist. I have Black friends. I can't tell you how many people I have heard say that. Or I have an Asian friend, or I have a Latina friend. And then, can I touch your hair? And that's one that kind of tickles me. I don't know what people think our hair is, but I remember I was downtown with my little cousin. She would come and spend the summers. And I think she was about 8 or 9. And she's very fair. And she had strawberry blonde hair. And people would come, she would be with my mother or with me, and people would come up to her and they wanted to touch her hair, I think, because they were trying to figure out, is she Black or isn't she Black? What is she? They couldn't quite identifier. And we want to pigeonhole people and put them in a firm box. And if we can't do that, we don't know how to deal with them, you know. Or, you know, I'm colorblind. When I look at you, I don't see color. And so I say to that, sell me that broken down used car, and I'm going to believe that it runs. And it's also insulting because I want you to see my color. My color speaks to my journey and my experience. And to deny that is to deny seeing me. A couple of microaggressive actions, you know, clutching your purse, dodging while passing a black man, or unnecessarily calling the police on people of color. And we have seen this happen very recently. Just the most recent, a 22-year-old girl, which really it surprised me that she would not only accused this young man of having her phone, but she attacked him. And I thought, what if he had attacked her, accusing her of having his phone? It would not have ended the same way. Or the woman in the park, when the man asked her simply to put her dog on a leash in New York, she said, I'm calling the police and I am going to tell them that a black man is threatening me. She was telling him what the response would be from the police because he was black. And then the last one, calling a black woman or man sister or brother, really speaks to becoming more familiar with people. And there are certain cultural words we use that we use among ourselves only. And so to cross that line is to be insensitive to that. And so how do we respond? And you know, we make the invisible visible because often the person doing it is unaware that they've engaged in demeaning or offensive comments. So we need to make that visible to educate the perpetrator. You know, shift the focus from what the person intended to the impact and help them to understand how the person of color received that. And so disarm the microaggression directly. Steer the conversation away from the problematic remark or joke to communicate that it's offensive. Model good behavior if others are present. And then at a different time, you don't want to embarrass someone necessarily. Have that conversation with the person about why his or her joke or remark was inappropriate. And why does your response help? If a receiver attempts to correct the microaggression or a person of color, that can place them in jeopardy depending on the power dynamics at play. And they have to weigh how they will respond and the consequences. Particularly, I find women of color who are in formation, they really have to swallow hard at many of the indignities that they experience because their goal is to make vows. And so they don't have equal power. And so often they don't feel they can address these things in community. You know, people of color are constantly being taxed by the microaggressions and the stress. So it's important for our white brothers and sisters to be bold and speak out so that everyone can breathe a little easier. I wanted to share this with you because I think it's one way for us to begin to look at our own communities and to examine how we live this out and what we can do to begin to change how we respond because it's important for us to do that. Okay, so we pulled up the reflection questions on the screen. The first one, what new insights do you have in light of today's discussion? Do you have a more succinct understanding of the term white privilege? How has your congregation either intentionally or unintentionally perpetuated and or benefited from white privilege? What does that legacy look like? How have people of color experienced white privilege and power in the history of your congregation? What does that legacy look like? What does a true anti-racist religious congregation look like? And how can predominantly white religious congregations become anti-racist allies to communities of color?
We were group one, and we had a wonderful discussion. Some of the
Okay.
insights is we really need to look and focus on how we treat one another, and looking again as Jesus as the model. And as one sister, I won't go into wonderful sharing. She was in New Orleans for 10 years and was working there, and had many blacks in in her school. And she knew from that experience she would never be able to get into what they go through. And that she knew it back then, that there was some real insights there because they had such experiences. And then I had three Hispanic sisters who they shared, again, the prejudice that they experienced here in California. Especially one of them didn't have her habit on, and she was going to the doctor, so she didn't have her habit on. And when she went to mass, the woman in front of her hung on to her purse really strongly because she thought she might want to steal her purse. And so we need to look at even our prejudice here in California.
Thank you, sister. Group number 8 and number 2 have the second question. Do you have a more succinct understanding of the term white privilege? Group number 8, do we have someone that wants to speak?
Yeah, I'm on group 8. I will speak for our group. I'm Sister Teresa.
Good.
And thank you. It's been great having you. With us, we're all different cultures. And so it was interesting seeing that, yes, there are white privileges. But when the cultures come together, we don't experience those white privileges. We experience ourselves as one, where we all are able to share and work together. But when there are a minority of us, different color people together, who we're a minority, we do not have those privileges of really speaking up and being present. And we also notice even within church, in our own church groups, there's a difference. And we talked about the accent. Accent has a lot to do where we are. They talk about us, or we don't feel that we are strong enough because of the accent, or because of our culture of who we are. And we get that negative feeling either if you're what area in our diocese, even in our own diocese, if you're in the north and south. I happen to be in the south, and when our kids go to play with kids in the northern part of our diocese, when the kids are out there running, getting ready, they'll yell out to them, "Hey, you guys, you didn't eat your burritos or your tacos," and to others they might laugh and they think it's cute, but it isn't. And so we notice that yes, we are either strong when we are different cultures together than when we are minorities.
Hey, thank you,
Thank
sister. Group number 2.
Anne Wenton,
Yes.
you're muted.
Unmute.
Yes.
You need to unmute, Anne.
The 4 of us were all parts of international congregations and had experiences of as basic as not speaking the same language when moving from country to country, and what that did for not feeling welcomed or part of the group. We also had one person who escaped from Mexico with her mother and other siblings when the father was killed for being Catholic down there many years ago now, but then coming here for safety and not being accepted at this Catholic school because she spoke Spanish as a young child. And the implications of that rejection that go through life when a child experiences that trauma first in another country, and then because of her language in school systems. I think we talked about the shock of looking again at how the church has profited and benefited, as you said, from slavery, beginning way back there with those papal letters in 1452, down to all the isolation and lack of support and rejection of people of color since then, and the courageous act of Black Catholics and women religious who have kept their shoulders to the plow to support their communities. but it is an awareness of us that we have international communities, and we need to work harder at being connected with the diversity around the world, here and around the world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Appreciate it. Group 9 and 3, the third question. How has your congregation either intentionally or unintentionally perpetuated and or benefited from white privilege? And what does that legacy look like? Group 9?
Hey, am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
We had a variety of things in our group. One sister shared how they did have one Black sister in their community, and how she during that time was trying to really find herself. And she's, you know, she kind of had a very difficult time integrating within an all-white community, and the all-white community did not really understand what she was going through. And she eventually left the community. And sister was saying it would be so interesting now to be able to connect with her, to find out about her experience and how she saw what happened, and to learn from that experience, you know. And and then we had another sister who she lives in an all Mexican community, but she said that, you know, sometimes even though they're all from one culture, there's a certain amount of racism depending on where they come from within the country, and that, you know. And then another sister worked in Philadelphia, and in a very in a Black community and she said that, you know, for her it was a tremendous learning experience. But she said too, she wondered when you know, she saw what happened with uh, George Floyd. Yeah, what
George Floyd.
yes, George Floyd. What you know, what did they really teach others, you know, before? How much did they really teach? And then myself, I shared how we are an international community. And one of the things that we've been looking at recently is the whole thing of interculturality, and how, you know, the racism that can come up no matter what culture you're from. And we were saying that in order to really understand one another's culture and everything, there has to be a certain intentionality of this is what you want to do. You want to come together, and you want to have an equality, because like you mentioned, Anita, about food.
Sister, I just want to stop you for a moment. You could go on, but I want to make sure we get everybody to comment.
Oh, no,
so
go right
maybe
ahead.
we have a
Yeah.
time you can come back. Yeah, thank you, sister. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Group 3. Did we have group 3?
Yes, I just unmuted. In our group, out of the 4 of us, 3 of us belong to international congregations with various cultures and colors of people. In one of the congregations, they're pretty much here in California. However, they've had many people of different cultures come to them. And for a while, we were saying how, like, even in our own province here, we have not had the Black people try to invite them or anything. However, in our congregations in our province here, we do have a lot of Latinos. And what we are trying to do from our last general chapter that just took place last year is really look at how do we continue to come together as a congregation, and how do we restructure and reuniting differently, not just within a province, but with other provinces of different color. And we were saying how we're trying to look at enculturality as well as invite people that we have worked with in our ministries who were people of color, Black and different cultures. When we worked together, was there anything that we unintentionally or unconsciously did that made them feel different? Could they help us to reflect on what it was like to work with us? So we're in the process of doing that and studying the whole issue of the white privilege that we're not even sure, did we do something, especially here, that would have been an invalidation of the persons we were working with. We're also looking at.
Very good, thank you. Sister, I'm gonna stop you right there because I want to get the other groups in and I'm aware of the time, but thank you very much. Let's go to group 4. Who's speaking for group 4? I think you're mute, sister. You've got to unmute.
There we go.
You have to unmute. Okay.
I'm
All right.
unmuted now, okay? In our group, I think because a lot of what people are saying has been echoed in our group, but I just want to begin with the context that one of the sisters gave us. She mentioned the book Caste, C-A-S-T-E-S, by Elizabeth Wilkerson. And she, in her groups
Right.
looking at that, she came to the realization that the US is a caste system country, along with places like India. And she used that to say, and I like the phrase she used, she says, we find ourselves catching ourselves orbiting with white skin, with privileges. So as she opened that up too, we looked at, a number of us mentioned experiences we had of either acting out of that white skin, and we caught ourselves and we're aware of that. And then others talked about, most of us haven't had experiences with African Americans in community. One mentioned of Baltimore and how shocked she was to learn that any Black woman who came was sent to another place. And then an international community, the experience of Kenyans, and that whole experience, because a number are international, the colonization that has taken place there, which is another word for white privilege in a lot of the mission countries, and how it's only now that those young Black women, now they're not so young, but they're owning and taking their own ownership because it never was good enough before.
We went through that with our own congregation. And I remember as a young sister, I confronted the Superior General. I was probably crazy, but I did raise that issue because I felt it was very, very important. So when you were talking, about, now I forgot, about privilege, and looking at our congregations, it's important to look at how do we relate. With caste, Sister Maria Simperman at CTU is going to be doing a 3-part presentation on the book. So I don't know if you have that information, but I can send it to Sister Kathy and she can share that with you. So I'm reading it now. Thank you so much, Sister.
You're welcome.
Group 5.
Yes, I am the person who's going to say a few words about this. How does the congregation, what does it look like, etc.? One community said, I didn't even know that it was, it was all white, so we weren't conscious of this. Another community said, we were also all white, but there was one African American, and we accepted her, we loved her. Another community, we had 4, and we accepted them, but a question came up at the end, how it would be interesting to hear from their side what their acceptance felt like to them. So that is, in a nutshell, what I read.
Yes. What I would offer back to all of you, when you say we accept and love, it would be interesting to see where the people of color, how they would respond to that. Did they always feel accepted and loved? And so that's, you have to be careful when you make those statements because you're not really sure on the experience of people of color and how they actually experience that. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Finally, group number 6.
If it's Mary O'Connor,
You need to unmute.
Mary.
Took notes, so maybe I should go. We got the question about how to become anti-racist allies. And we said that individually, before we as a community can begin to do that, we individually have to do the hard work and the deep discernment of noticing how we have been influenced by our culture and the way we have been taught history. For example, Anita introduced, and it was new to me and it was 5 years old for someone else, the whole 1452 bulls. That was all new to me, but wow. No. Anyway, in a couple of cases, maybe 5 of us in the group had come from monocultural societies. I from Ireland and Mexican sisters from Mexico. The society was monocultural at the time. So there, we expect other people to accommodate to us because we had no experience of mixing in. And that, you know, expecting them to accommodate to who we are, expecting them to disappear, sort of, we excuse that by saying, okay, this is the way you will succeed in this dominant society. You just have to do this, this, and this, and then you will get ahead. So that's how we excuse ourselves. Finally, we finished by a sister sharing that her experience of young children taught her that they do not come into the world knowing about racial prejudice, color differences, and so on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sister. Appreciate it. Thank you all so much. I know it was a short period of time, and I apologize for needing to move on and not allowing several of you to speak further. But really, the whole point of this is to begin the conversation and to give you some tools to go back to your own communities and continue. If the commitment has to be there, even if you are an all-white congregation, what does the artwork look like? Does the places you live reflect the diversity of the world? Because we belong to a universal church. And as women religious, we should have something within our places that speak to us being one, you know, the diversity and the oneness. So I would encourage you to look at that and to reach out to those women perhaps that were in your congregation, women of color, who left. I think that would be a wonderful idea. I know that happened with a friend of mine, and it was very healing for her to be invited back and to be able to share the story of her experience in that congregation, and for the sisters to hear that. So again, I thank you so much for willing to walk this journey and for wanting to really look at this issue and to be proactive and to really be anti-racist allies to people of color. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Anita. Thank you very much. And boy, have you ever opened for us this conversation that I'm hoping, and it'll be up to the sisters, but thinking that we might need to continue. And so it's just been a privilege to have you with us. Folks, not that Anita was the last one on my list to check out, but I have to say that when I was trying to find a presenter for us, I went through a number of people who just weren't going to be available. First of all, we wanted to find somebody right here from San Diego, as you can imagine, to tell us, you know, what this reality was. But anyway, my search finally led to Anita, and she said, I would love to join you on January 16th. And I was like, really? and she is the very one we needed to have with us to open this up. And as she was speaking, I was thinking, my goodness, with all she shared with us, if this is the way people of color experience being in a religious community, what must people who don't have a supportive, spiritual-based group experience? You know, so I think there's just so many levels for us to really delve into as we consider the whole issue of racial prejudice in our country. And to that end, as the Sisters Council was setting up this event, we said, we know we're not going to have enough time in our small groups. We know we're not going to have enough time to share with each other. So we are ready to propose to you today another session on this. We would have no presenter. We would only come together, focus on some questions, and then do some sharing among ourselves, which is so rich. And so if you want to write down these dates, I'll be sending an email about this, but February 4th is a Thursday. And when we had our talk with the bishop, it was a weekday from 4 to 5. And that seemed to be pretty good for folks. So we could do it on February 4th from 4 to 5. Or we thought if a Saturday is better, Saturday the 6th, because it's just a few weeks away from now. So this is all going to be fresh. Or would Saturday the 6th be better from 11 to 12? You know, and by a show of hands, and if you put your hand up in the middle of the screen, I'm going to ask, what's better for you, a weekday or a Saturday, just to get a sense, okay? You're not making a commitment, but just to get a sense, and I have to go to my second screen, so keep your hand up until I tell you to put it down. How many would prefer a weekday as on Thursday? How many? Okay, keep your hands up. Okay, your hands up. And all right, how many prefer a Saturday? Put your hands up. Okay.
I prefer a Saturday. You can't see my hand.
Okay, that's good. All right. Well, the Saturdays have it by preference. But you know what? If there are a number of people who could only meet on a Thursday and you would really want us to send out a Zoom for a Thursday, let me know that. And if we have enough for a small group, we'll do it. Okay. So I'll be sending out more information about that. I've got 3 other quick announcements. So hang in there because I think you're going to want to be knowing about these. You're the group of folks who are getting the first information about this. First of all, you know that we took up a collection for the Casa de Misericordia, the new venture, ministry venture, to serve the refugees and the immigrants coming across the border at this time. Thank you for your donations. And yesterday I went to the Casa de Misericordia at Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish in Barrio Logan and presented the check to Sister Mary Waskowiak. Joy Chan, who you all know now, and who's on this video with us right now, she went with me and taped the presentation. So we are now presenting to you our very own version of Publishers Clearinghouse winner. And it's very brief. It's like 1 minute and 30 seconds. So I think our technicians are ready to roll that. And because I didn't think of this, we didn't think of this when we went, it's right below I-5, as you know, right below I-5, and the traffic noises are horrendous. And I'm whispering into the camera as if this is going to be a big surprise. Shh. You know, we're here to present the check from the sisters. So come along with me to the door and we'll do it. And then you're not going to hear that though, because it's very much of it anyway. And then when they open the door, because I ring the doorbell, then I just say to them, Sister Mary, we're here to present to you the collection from the sisters. And you'll see what happens with this. And it's Mary Waskowiak and one of the community members, Angeli Raya, who answer the door. So go ahead and roll it, technician. Whoops. Hello, we're here at Casa de Misericordia to present the check to the community for their work with the migrants and the refugees. Yes, for the contribution. And I think, Mary Waskowiak, if you want to unmute and say something to us, we'd love to hear you.
Well, first of all, I'm crying. And I think, I'm not positive, but I think it's you, Linda Lutz, who had the idea with the community of the Holy Spirit, because I had requested this through a letter to the elected leaders of religious congregations of Region 14. And Linda, with the Sisters of the Community of the Holy Spirit, said, let's invite the diocesan sisters to share this. It means the world to me. I am not a solo operator. And to think that we are together in this as sisters on mission, I am so touched. Because of COVID, things have been slowed down. Our community of 6 is moving, and we have a great collaboration going with Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish. We hope to open the Community Resource Center sometime between mid-February and June. COVID and other factors play into it. The other thing I have learned, and I'm looking at Maru. Maru has been a wonderful help to us as well. I'm learning, thanks to Sister Ann Durst, Society of the Holy Child Jesus, and founder of Casa Cornelia Legal Center. She said to me, as only she could, Mary, tell your community to open your eyes and open your ears. The migrants are hiding right in front of you. So our work is before us. And please, sisters, know, any of you, contact me. Any way we can be together in this prayer, walking together, whatever we can do, please know I want our house to be your house, our work to be your work, our big picture work. Anita Baird, I was so touched by your line that our work is not done until truly all of us are at the same table. And I wrote that down and circled it. That's our spirit. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm stunned at the donation, and it will go to the Community Resource Center and to the particular work. We don't have time to tell you about it, but it's coming, so you'll know. Thanks so much, Kathy. Thank you for the way you can bring surprises. It was really good, and Joy was great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, and big blessings. And I want you all to know that as I was setting up our Sisters Day, Sisters Zoom, Sister Anita asked me, she said, would you send me the link to the Sisters of Selma, because I wanna see maybe watch that again. So I did, and I had just written the newsletter. So I thought, well, I'll just send her the whole newsletter, and then she can get the link and she can see how I'm publicizing her and what I'm saying, so she knows. And so she read the newsletter, and she got back to me immediately, and she said, Kathy, I want my stipend that you would be paying me to go to the Casa de Misericordia. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, absolutely. Just make out the check instead of to me, to the Casa. So her contribution to ours today not only has been this profound opening of the conversation, but a really lovely gift to the Casa. So thank you for that, Anita.
Thank you, Anita. Oh.
Yes, yes. All right. So continued blessings on all of our ministries. My third announcement has to do with our jubilarians. And obviously, we're not going to be able to have a live Jubilee this year, but the Sisters Council, God bless them, have decided that we are going to offer a virtual Jubilee celebration. And you can name it what you want. It's going to be either a happy holy hour or a holy happy hour. But that's what it's going to be. And it'll be on April 10th. So you're getting the date today, April 10th, from 4 to 5 o'clock. It's a Saturday afternoon, and we hope everybody will be able to join us for that happy event. And then the Jubilarians will also be celebrated in person, God willing, next year with the 2022 group. Okay, so that's the Jubilee announcement. And then finally, just want to let you know, if you're not aware, Bishop McElroy has just is in the process of starting a diocesan pastoral council and invited a sister from the diocese to be on that. And the Sisters Council talked about that. And the decision is that Sister Rosemary Nicholson is going to be our representative from the Sisters of the Diocese to the Diocesan Pastoral Council. And so we thank you very much, Rosemary. It's wonderful that you're going to be doing that for us. The bishop gave a little description of what he hopes to do with the pastoral council that is just beginning at the Curia meeting this week. And he said, the first priority of this pastoral council is going to be to help the diocese prepare for coming out of this COVID so that we can be effective in this post-COVID environment of proclaiming the gospel as strongly as we've ever been able to proclaim it. So that's going to be the first task of the pastoral council that Rosemary will be our spokeswoman for. So thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
All right. We'll all be with you in that. Yes, exactly. Okay. And let's see. Very good. So I think that's it. We're gonna end with that America the Beautiful 2020 as our closing prayer. But feel free to unmute yourself, and if you have any question or comment in a very brief way before we end, feel free to offer that at this time. Anybody have a question or a comment? We still have 2 minutes.
Kathy, did you?
Kathy, I was looking in the chat box and some were asking about the materials. So you have them, and if people want them, hopefully they can get it from you.
Yes, the document that was put on the screen.
Yes.
Certainly, I will send that out. I will send that out to you. Thank you. Yes. Okay, anyone else?
Is there any other place, a particular book that would show that history, Anita? Especially Father, didn't he write a whole book?
Father Massingill did, yes. A lot of this comes from Father Cyprian Davis's book on Black Catholics, which came out quite a while ago. He has since passed, but a lot of that comes from his book. I will see if I can get the name and I'll share it with Kathy, and then she can share it with you.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Lovely to see everybody from Ireland. I'm talking to you from Ireland. Lovely to see you all. Miss you.
Yes, Carmel, thank you for joining us again. It's wonderful to have you with us. But we like it even more when we can see your lovely face.
Right. I'll bring it out next time.
Okay, that's right. We all understand. We all understand. Okay, very good. Anybody else? Okay, then I think we're ready for the closing prayer, and let's again be united in our prayer during these days, especially this next week, for peace and civility in our country.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain,
for purple mountains, majesties above thy fruited plain. America, America, God shed much grace on thee. So spread the love sent from above, from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful, thy immigrants who hail from every land.
Their hope and heart and diligence, like gifts from God's own hand.
America, America,
thy grace shall
yet remain to greet the poor who reach this shore with open arms again.
Oh, beautiful, oh, Mother Earth, I'll nestle at your breast.
Just as we sing with love and pride, so all nations are blessed. Yes, America, America, alone cannot abide. No, God gives thee pause to mend thy flaws with truth, thy only guide. Oh, beautiful, thou working folk built cities, till thy soil. Proud Africans in bloody chains, the wealth built from their toil. Yes, Lord. America, America, God shed much grace on thee. Yes. So spread the love sent from above, from sea to shining sea. Bring sisterhood, bring brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Oh, yes.
Amen, amen. May it be so.
Thank you. Amen.
Thank you.
Yes. And a special thanks again to Sister Anita. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you on other Zooms for sure. We'll bring you to San Diego when we can, perhaps. Yes. And then special thanks to Sister Vera and to Joy Chan for being our text today. Wonderful, wonderful. And to the Sisters Council and to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
All right. All right.
Sister Kathy,
Yeah.
if people want to meet, we can create break rooms for them just to choose and
chats.
meet themselves. Yeah.
Okay. So if any of you want to tell us who your personal friends are, we'll give you a chat room to go talk together. Yeah. Really.
Yep. If anybody wants, just
Yeah.
go to break room and
Yeah. Maybe you want to have Carmel unmask herself in a small group room.
Yeah.
okay, Carmel, I created you on one. Anybody wants to join you?
Okay. Thank you, Vera.
Okay. All right.
Anybody else? Sister Maru, I know they wanted to meet Sister Maru the last time.
Yeah, where is Maru still on?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I see you. Okay, very good. Great, great.
If
Well, you're looking
anybody you
good.
know is by themselves, any sister that would like to get a phone call, Kathy would gladly take the name and give it to some of us to give you a call and make sure you're still feeling connected.
That's right. That's coming up.
How are you, Sister Maru? You are on mute. We cannot hear you. You're on mute. Did you want to say hello, Sister Maru?
Who's there?
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing well, sister, and yourself?
Good, good, good. Good
Doing
to
well.
see you. I know the last time I think, yeah, they were saying that we would have, people wanted to say hello to you. But I think
Oh,
Sister, what's her name, just left. Yeah.
okay.
Okay. Oh, I think she's gonna close it, so we'll probably get kicked out. Okay. You are doing good, Sister.
Yes, I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
Well, in this um, claustro, we cannot do
Yeah.
much, but I'm here
Yeah.
at home, I'm working, and it's good.
Good, good, good. I'm glad you're safe and everything. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, and I go to my things, and then I go to Tijuana, and uh, you know, I'm just taking very good care of not being